All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of Behind the Scenes of Health with Dr. Ron, powered by the Career Pilot Digital Health Network, where we talk to healthcare professionals who are exploring digital and non-clinical careers together. Today, I'm joined by Oyinkan Akinseye, a registered mental health nurse who's turned to a digital clinical safety officer. And she's got a decade of experience across NHS and digital health innovation. And now she's helping organizations make technology safer and more effective. So if you're a nurse or allied healthcare professional who is wondering what life really looks like beyond the other side of clinical practice, this episode is for you. So let's dive into the conversation. Thank you first of all, Yiko, for agree to come on the show.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's start with your, early years, nursing foundations. What was those days like? What drew you into mental health nursing?
So early years, I came into nursing in 2010. So I actually initially wanted to do psychology. And I was looking at all the different options available to me, and I saw nursing was one of them. So after I finished my A levels, I went into university to study nursing, mental health nursing. And yeah, that's where it all started, really. So I did my undergraduate 3 years, and then I qualified after that, and then got straight into the NHS from there. So that's how it all started.
So when you look back at those first few years, what moments or lessons kind of shaped how you sort of see patient safety today?
And that's a really good question. I think in terms of patients, because patient safety is such a broad term and such a broad topic. There's digital clinical safety, and then there's just patient safety
Mm.
as a whole, safety on the wards, safety using devices, keeping patients safe just generally. But I think when I was on the wards as a nurse, as a young student nurse, just coming out of A level, it was very apparent to me that the ward area was quite unsafe, not just for patients, but also for staff as well.
Mhm.
That was due to a myriad of reasons. We know that in the NHS there are staffing issues, having the right amount of staff to take care of
Yeah.
patients and things like that. That was a major concern when I was a nurse on the ward. And I feel like having that experience on the ward definitely shaped how I think today as a clinical safety officer, because I'm always assessing risk. I'm always aware of the different risks that could come up, just from that experience of being a nurse on the ward, and how to sort of mitigate risk and how to keep myself safe and patients safe as well.
So looking at those moments again, was there any point where you said, "Oh, this process could actually be better with technology"? Did you that ever cross your mind?
To be honest, when I was a nurse on the ward, I was not really thinking about technology like that.
Okay.
Honestly, I wasn't really thinking about tech. I was very much a nurse who was just there because of the passion of helping others. Yeah, I was not thinking about digital. I did not know that those options were even available to me back then. This is back in, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. This was back in 2013. Digital didn't even cross my mind as far as that. But yeah.
So at what point did digital now come into your radar?
Well, it came into my radar probably around the pandemic time.
Okay.
So during the pandemic, and I think that was probably a turning point for a lot of nurses and a lot of healthcare professionals, because when the pandemic hit, when COVID hit, it became very difficult for nurses and healthcare professionals to take care of their patients safely in that face-to-face way that we always have.
Yeah.
And so we had to look at different tools to help us achieve that. And that's where digitization came into play for me.
Yeah.
Conducting appointments via video, calling patients, things like that. At that time of the pandemic, I was working in the community as a substance misuse nurse and as a lead nurse of substance misuse service. When the pandemic hit, lockdown, as a lead nurse, I was also responsible for safety. That is, what do you call it? what do you call it now? Making sure everything was clean. I can't remember the terminology.
Yeah.
It escapes me. But making sure that everything was clean, everything was sterile. I was responsible for ordering PPE, all of those things. So yeah, it was very challenging. It was a very challenging time. And I just, I began to think about the different options available to me and if I wanted to stay on the front line, so to speak, in such a dangerous, it was very scary,
Mhm.
scary time for healthcare professionals that were working with patients face to face. So yeah, that's when I actually made the transition into technology. I went and worked for a company that did remote monitoring. So, in that same vein, that company was growing exponentially at the time because of the pandemic and because of the barriers that were in place as far as lockdown and actually nursing patients. So, it was a remote monitoring system that I worked on. And I came into technology as a customer success manager.
Okay.
So that title essentially is a fancy and fun title for somebody who implements technology.
Okay.
Yeah, we implement technology successfully with the clients. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. Yeah.
So before you sort of went in like, full head on into this, did you have any misconceptions, about digital health?
I had no expectations, to be honest, because up until the point that I actually moved into tech, I had only worked for the NHS and also private healthcare organizations. So I was very much only really aware of the environment of healthcare organizations. I didn't really have experience of technology. So I came in with no expectations. And it was definitely huge culture shift for me was a very much, it was totally different when you're working for a supplier compared to when you're working for a healthcare organization. Not just from the processes, but just the culture as well. And also the goals. When you're working for a supplier or a technology company, the ultimate goal is revenue.
Revenue. Yeah.
Even when you're in a health tech companies, it's just very different. And that was, definitely a shift for me and what I had experienced before. Any other misconception? Not really, to be honest. Like I said, I didn't really have any expectations. I was quite open minded, I would say.
So you mentioned it was a big culture shift and all of that. So how did you go about learning about this? So was there any formal training? Was it just your curiosity making you dig deep, or was it like on the job learning?
There was a mixture of both. So in terms of like uh, learning courses and things like that, formal courses. I didn't do any formal courses before I transitioned into technology. I didn't go and study IT. I didn't, do any IT courses or anything like that, but I did have an A level in IT.
Okay.
So IT isn't something that's sort of foreign to me. Also, one of my parents is data scientist and has been for a long, long time. So I'm not unfamiliar with the world of IT, but I didn't do any formal training per se. In terms of preparation and readings and learning on the job, it was very much learning on the job. So for me, it was, when I came into technology field, I was learning from my colleagues. I had a lot of coaching. The environment that I was in was primed for that. So it was a great environment for learning, and they really supported that. And they knew as well about my experience as a nurse that I didn't have that much experience in technology. In terms of like self-directed learning, definitely did do a lot of self-directed learning whilst I was on the jobs. Reading, looking for short courses, free courses. There are a lot of free courses online these days. You can use Udemy and things like that. Even LinkedIn Learning has a lot of short courses to learn about technology. But it was very much sort of on the job
Learning.
learning ideas from my colleagues. And I think also I had quite an open mind to learning. So I'm like a sponge. You have to be sort of open to being coached as well. And to putting your hands up and saying, "Hey, I don't actually understand this.
Yeah.
I don't know this. Please can you teach me?" And so that's what I did. So yeah, that's how I started. As years have gone on, I have done a little bit more certification. So I did do project management certification Prince 2. I also did the scaled agile safe
It's safe.
product management course as well. And that those all of those things were just helping me to build on the knowledge that I had, just to kind of consolidate some of the knowledge that I already had,
Yeah.
especially this agile and product development. Because when in my role as a customer success manager, I learned a lot about product development and things like that, but I wanted to understand that theoretical framework as well. So that's why I did that. So yeah.
Think it's good you mentioned this because a lot of people sort of think, oh, I need to go and do one big degree, or I need to do a master's in maybe digital health or informatics or whatever before they get into this space. So it's a bit refreshing hearing that yours was the other way around. Really, get into the field, mop us as much as you can, then sort of supplement them with additional courses and all of that. If you're watching, you've got the answer to this question. Now, so I'm just curious, your nursing background, right? How important do you think that is in what you do at the moment?
Extremely important. So in terms of digital clinical safety, you need to be a registered professional in order to actually be a CSO. So it's paramount. My nursing profession is paramount to what I do on a day-to-day basis, because I need to understand patient safety from a clinical standpoint. I need to understand risk from a clinical standpoint. In the world of digital, like just in the digital world generally, right? Just thinking away from health tech and med tech,
Yeah.
companies have to have some sort of risk assessment on their systems, whether they're medical devices, they're, whatever kind of digital system, usually they have some assessment. Whereas with patient safety, clinical safety, you're really thinking about it from a clinical perspective, risk that can be posed to a patient safety, patient's well-being
Yeah.
or person. So, you need to have that context. You need to understand, um, the clinical area in order to do the risk assessment. And also, you are signing that document with your
Name.
registration and your name. So, if there are things that do go wrong with the system, it's not, you won't sort of be blamed or anything, but you are sort of responsible
Mhm.
to an extent for that assessment. So there is that level of responsibility that comes, if anyone who's a nurse or a healthcare professional that has a registration, you always sort of have that in the back of your mind
Yeah.
whenever you do anything. Okay, I am accountable here because I do have my registration, and so I need to work and behave in a certain type of way, even outside of the clinical area,
Yeah.
generally. So it's the same thing with clinical safety. You are sort of responsible for any safety reports, safety cases that you create.
So that's really key. I think one of the key things I picked was you need to be registered professional before you can get into this role. Because I've seen it's either nurses or doctors and occasionally maybe pharmacists who I've seen in the CSO roles, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. I think also speech and language
Okay.
therapists, pharmacy technicians, I think,
Okay.
physiotherapists.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's it.
I believe it's any professions that are
Registered.
registered accountable to some sort of body.
Okay. That's
I believe that.
interesting. So I want to touch a bit on the certification. You mentioned you did Prince 2, you did the Safe PM course. Now, in hindsight, right, would you say if you had done these courses before getting in, would it have made sense to you, or is it after you've gotten in?
To be honest, doing those courses before I came into the industry, I don't think it would have provided me with wouldn't have given me any sort of the great context, because the thing about the courses that I have done, maybe project manage, maybe Prince,
Yeah.
Prince is very Prince 2 is
Prince
quite general. It applies not just to IT systems. It applies to, if you're
Portuguese.
PM doing construction or whatever. So Prince, in terms of the principles of Prince 2, I think it can apply to so many different industries. So I feel like that one is sort of separate. In terms of the scaled agile product management course, the SAFE course, I really feel that you need to be in that environment to understand how the theories apply to the practical, process of building products, because I didn't have that understanding before I came into technology. I had no idea how products were created, digital products were created, health tech products were created. It's only when I came into technology that I was able to actually see and be a part of it as well. And then I thought to myself, oh, I want to consolidate my knowledge. Okay, I've done it, I've seen it, but I want to actually consolidate that knowledge. So that's why I then went and did the course. And even the scaled agile course, it's more so specifically for building projects in large organizations. So if you're somebody that works in a small startup or a small technology company, scaled agile might not actually be the best fit for you. It still provides you a lot of knowledge and concept how products are built. But it's more so if I was to be working in an Apple or, something that was really big where there are like constant release cycles, constant, every 2 weeks, new releases
Yeah.
coming out. That's where Scale Agile is going to really help me. But yeah, I think and that's the thing about digital. There's no one route to getting in.
Yeah.
There's no one route of finding a role. I just feel like you need to have an open mind. You need to be open to learning and you need to want it, really. And for me, when I made that transition, I was just I was seeing different roles and applying, and I applied for a role that was in my domain. So I was a mental health nurse, and the system that I ended up working with was a system that was being implemented in mental health.
Okay.
So that's how it kind of came together for me. So if you're a nurse that works in ITU, or if you're a radiologist or whatever your domain is, or obs and gynae, it might be worth looking at companies, health tech companies, med tech companies that are in those domains where you can bring your expertise and your specialist clinical knowledge because a lot of companies, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who have that domain knowledge, who are malleable, open to learning, to come in and work with them.
Okay. So for someone who is new to this field, a lot of people will be watching and wondering, what does a digital clinical safety officer do? So what is your day-to-day like as a CSO?
Yeah, it's a great question. So essentially, as a clinical safety officer, assessing health IT systems against DCB 129 and also DCB 160. So DCB 129 is for manufacturers and DCB 160 is for organizations that are actually implementing the systems. And I'm essentially trying to get in deep with the system or the product. Firstly, understanding it, its functionality, its architecture, and then exploring the potential failure modes or the potential hazards that could happen or come up as a result of this system being implemented or built and used with patients.
Yeah.
So it's specific to patient safety. So I'm looking at potential hazards that could potentially harm a patient through the use of the system. So my day to day is very much learning about products, really getting in deep, creating hazard logs, writing hazard logs, which are long documents that list out all of these different potential failure modes that probably won't happen, might happen. And then also when I'm working with an organization that builds a product, I'm looking at all of the controls that they have in place already.
Yeah.
To mitigate those hazards, but also helping them to develop further, more robust controls to mitigate those hazards. And when I say controls, I mean things like testing controls,
Yeah.
design controls, training control, things that they can do to ensure that the system is as safe as it can be for
Yeah.
the patient. So yeah, that's what I spend my day doing, writing hazard logs, writing reports, and learning about systems. But there is also a great degree of like project management as well, being on top of things and chasing up people and, coordinating meetings and things like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
So do you do a lot of meetings, like on a typical day, how many percentage is spent doing meetings? Because that's something
Um, Meetings, I mean, I think in terms of percentage of meetings in a typical day, I would probably say about 25%.
okay.
Yeah, or sometimes less. It varies week to week, but most of my times is spent sort of writing reports.
Sports.
Yeah, writing documents, looking at systems, looking at testing protocols, looking at training documentation, looking at different policies. If I'm working with trusts, I'll be looking at their implementation. Trusts, there might be more meetings just with
Yeah.
the NHS. You know how NHS is,
Yeah.
yeah, be more meetings involved with those guys. Just yeah, it depends, but meetings are sort of minimal. Most of my time is sort of spent writing.
So you also mentioned you spend a lot of time trying to understand the system. So do you get to do this like hands-on using the system, or is it more reading the documentation to understand what's being built, or it makes?
Yeah, it's a mix of both, really. One of the first things you need to do when you are building a safety case is get a demo of the system. So usually I get a demo of the system, so that I can understand how it works. And then I might be given access to sort of a training environment or, staging environment or
Yeah.
something like that so that I can kind of tinker around with the system myself in my own time. But also I would look at the training material as well. That's always helpful. Yeah, a mix of both.
Okay, fair enough. One of the, like call it, the hallmarks of every implementation, usually the go lives. What does that look like for you from a clinical safety officer perspective? What do you watch out for?
At go live, did you say?
Yep, go live. Yeah.
Well, in terms of going live, you would, in an ideal situation, you would want to have your safety case finalized before you go live. But that doesn't always happen because of different priorities. That's just how it is. And sometimes safety case report is done retroactively. So when the system has been live or in live service for a long period of time. But in terms of go live, for me as a CSO, it's just ensuring that, we've done our due diligence. We have mitigated all of the potential risks to as low as what is reasonably practicable. Um, and that, we're kind of happy to go ahead. Could be instances where, you're doing the safety case, you're doing the risk analysis and you realize that actually there are hazards here that haven't been mitigated to as low as reasonably practicable, and actually we need to delay the go live. That's always a possibility that can happen as a result of doing clinical safety. Um, Realize, okay, this can't go ahead. We need to delay. We need to do more. We need to add in more controls. There needs to be more testing. That whatever the case may be, that can also happen as well. So ideally, you have a signed off safety case, but that doesn't always happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looking at go lives, like before, because I know before go lives, it's a lot of work between the technical teams, ops teams, clinical teams, the whole whatever. So how do you sort of collaborate with the technical, the clinical, the ops to make sure what we are doing or what we are deploying or what we are implementing is very safe and usable?
I mean, in terms of like collaboration, that clinical safety process isn't something that should be done in a silo. It's not just the clinical safety officer that does the risk analysis. It's actually a team of people. So, from the very start, you have your project team who will consist of product leads, maybe an operations lead, engineering leads, training leads, etc., etc., etc. So they should all be a part of that process from the start.
Okay.
So from the plan all the way up to signing up the safety case. So having weekly touch points, in terms of building out the hazard log, also you'd have some sort of workshop where all of those key players come together to look at the potential failure modes. So yeah, it's not something that you do on your own as a CSO. You should have those uh, team members
Yeah.
also contributing as well. It's paramount.
Okay. So
Yeah.
looking at your skills now, right? I know there are a lot of skills that have been very sort of critical to your success as a CSO. So which ones came from the nursing background? Because I think one of the things I come across a lot is the issue of transferable skills. People keep asking, what can I move from nursing or from being a doctor or a physio or whatever into this space? So from your own background, what did you move over from nursing?
That's a good question. Probably being organized. Being organized is really important. I think that's something that as a nurse, you have to be really organized. You have to be able to manage competing priorities as a nurse. So, that's one thing. Other transferable skills, probably think writing skills are really important. So I know we always joke, doctors' handwriting and stuff. And then actually clinicians, we write in shorthand all the time. Yeah, I feel like as a clinical safety officer, you need to know how to write in a way that your audience are other clinicians and other staff members that are going to use the
Yeah.
system. You need to write in a way that is understandable to them. So there's sometimes I think there could be a misconception that the documentation that you write as a safety officer is, highly technical or, whatever. But actually it needs to be easily understandable by your key audience, which is other clinicians, which is why clinicians are clinical safety officers and not, some technical person doing it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, definitely writing skills. I think just also risk assessment skills. As a nurse or as a professional, you're always assessing risk, constantly, not just when you do a risk assessment document, or an assessment. You're constantly assessing risk when you're taking care of your patients.
Yeah.
You're always thinking, oh, what are their risk levels now? How are they how are they presenting? Are they ready to be discharged? What could be the risk if they're discharged? You're always thinking about that. And that is how you should be thinking as a clinical safety officer. You're always thinking about what could be the potential risks of this IT system
What could go
to
wrong?
what could go wrong? Yeah, what could potentially go wrong? And so, yeah, those things I would say. What else? I think those are it. I can't think of any others at the moment. I definitely think people skills are really important. Another reason why clinical safety officers are healthcare professionals is because we have got that skill of talking to people, being able to relate to people, having that ability, those soft skills to be able to understand different team members' priorities and what they're looking for and what they're hoping to achieve. You need to be able to sort of manage expectations.
Yeah.
You need to be able to understand, okay, so I have my product lead here, my project management lead here, I've got my engineering team here, and they all have different priorities. They all, in terms of clinical safety, the project lead they just want this over the line. I need this done, right? And then your product manager is thinking, oh, actually, I really want to know how I can improve the design. Oyinka, tell me, how can we improve the design so that it's safe for patients? Engineering leads are thinking, oh, we've got these test scripts, but we need to beef them up a bit. How can we improve that? So you need to be able to understand everybody's different priorities and be able to speak their language as well.
Yeah.
So those soft skills as a clinicians really come into play, I would say.
So in terms of, the learning the language, how did you sort of struggle with learning the language? Because every industry has its own lingo and,
Yeah.
jargons. And so did you struggle with that?
Yeah, definitely. 100%, especially when it came to things like architecture, when you start talking about architecture structure, databases and all of these, different terms. It was like they were speaking a different language. It was like, honestly, it was so confusing. But as I've said, you need to be open to learning. And as you're working on these different projects, you use Google, you do your own research. There are so many resources out there now to help you to understand the different terms, the different technical terms and abbreviation and jargon. Sometimes I'll just make a note of different things if I don't understand them. And also just asking, can you explain that to me? Sometimes I'll say, hey, I'm actually a nurse. I'm not an engineer.
I'm not a text.
Yeah. No, I'm an engineer. I'm actually a nurse. So if you could just explain to me what you mean by, redundancy, database redundancy, can you just please explain that to me and what that means in layman's terms or whatever the case? So yeah, definitely learning about those architectural, infrastructural terms and all of those things in the world of cloud and things like that. There are a lot of resources though, and there's a lot of free resources as well in terms of, those things. If you want to go and learn, you can. It's so easy these days to just go and find short courses online and get yourself clued up. So I do still do a lot of that till today. And that's the thing about technology as well. There's always new technologies coming out, with AI. We're all learning about AI and things like that. So we're all in the same boat, so to speak. Even the experts,
I still
the
learn.
tech experts, they're learning too. Yeah. So, always finding new opportunities to learn and just go in and do my own research is important.
Because I think that one of the likely areas that people hardly talk about when you talk about career transitions is this part of, you have to start learning an industry from scratch, really. Asking for mentorship, reading a lot, I don't think it's discussed enough. I like your honesty to say, yes, you actually struggled. Even myself, when I shifted to, I struggled because I'm in meetings, I'm like, okay, what's a red log? I don't even know what you're talking about. I just jot it down there. Or what's this? What's that? So it's difficult, but with time, it gets easier, really. Looking at your own pivot now, were there any fears or doubts down the line? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, 100%. There was definitely fears. There was definitely imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
There was definitely, fear, I don't know what I'm doing, that kind of thing, or, I'm not sure about this. Coming in from nursing, coming in from healthcare into, a for-profit business is
Yeah.
just so different. Even just like culture wise, I've said that, I think I mentioned that before,
Mm-hmm.
and how they work day to day is just so different from the public sector. So, the pace as well, especially if you come in working for a startup, you have your role, but you actually are doing all sorts of different things because you're kind of pitching in and helping in all sorts of different areas. So yeah, it was just different. It was definitely scary at times when I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing. But you kind of just get used to things, and as you learn and you gain more confidence, things get a lot easier. You also realize that everybody around you is also still learning as well.
It's a bit
And
reassuring.
yeah, you have something to offer them as well. So um, there's always that skill exchange. And I think I've been quite fortunate that I've worked in organizations that champion skill exchange, that champion coaching, that champion learning, an environment for learning. I think I've been fortunate in that respect. But yeah, for sure, definitely fears, definitely, you know.
So if a nurse or clinician was, listening and thinking, well, I'm not sure I could actually become a clinical safety officer, what would you tell them?
I would say, that if you really want to become a clinical safety officer, if it's something that you really want to do, you can, you know. Um, I think sometimes people may not understand what the reality is of being a clinical safety officer when they actually come into the role.
Yeah.
It is very different from, for me anyway. Before I became a clinical safety officer, I didn't have many expectations, but if it's something that you really want to do, you can. And for me, I've learned so much over the last year and a half about clinical safety. I've picked up so many new skills. I've just, it's completely transformative for me. And I'm still not an expert. I'm still learning. Do you know what I mean? And that's just the nature of the job. But if it's something that you really want to do, you definitely can do it. You just need to go for it. If you see roles, if you're working in the NHS, for example, there are a lot of clinical safety roles available within the NHS. Go ahead and apply. If it's, you want to work for a company that our company's recruiting, go ahead and apply. Don't limit yourself because oh, I don't have this course or that degree or whatever the case. If it's something you're really passionate about, I would say go for it.
You still see patients?
No.
And you don't see yourself going back to see patients?
I would never say never.
Okay.
Yeah, I would never say never, but at this point, probably not. This time, that I don't see myself doing that at this time, but you never know what happens in the future. I would never say never.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I hated or that was, I enjoyed nursing. I enjoyed working with people. I'm a people person. So, yeah, it's not something that I would be opposed to. Yeah.
So you've mentioned courses, you've mentioned certifications. Are there any communities for clinical safety officers? Like, I'm trying to get into this space. Is there any community anywhere that I could join that could sort of help me in this transition process?
I think it's so in terms of communities and things like that. In I don't think there's any sort of that I know of.
Okay.
That the communities that I know of are sort of communities for people who are already clinical safety officers.
Okay.
But I think in terms of networking, if it's something that you are really passionate about and you want to sort of, I would say just reach out to people who are clinical safety officers.
Okay.
If you really want to be a clinical, I have a lot of people that reach out to me.
Yeah.
Just asking me for, advice or guidance or, they're interested in safety. And I'm always happy to speak to people. I don't gatekeep information. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, reaching out to people on LinkedIn is a very good thing to reach out. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. In terms of communities, there's a community called the CSO Coffee and Chat. But again, that's for people who are already CSOs. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there are some digital health forums as well. Digital health forum. I can't remember what the website is.
Is it the Digital Health Network?
Yeah, Digital Health Network.
I think they have a CSO track in there. I think
yes.
CIO, CIO, CNIO, and probably CSO, right?
Yes. They have some forums and boards on there, so you can check those out. I think that there's also events and things like that, like the HET event and Giant and things like that. You can go to and speak to CSOs. I would say, yeah, just reach out. Most CSOs are happy to chat and give you any guidance or whatever the case.
So if you're watching and you're interested in becoming a safety officer, clinical safety officer, just reach out to her on LinkedIn. So she said she's open to sharing information and all of that. So how do you see this role evolving over the next probably 5-10 years? Now we have AI coming at us so fast, rapidly. How do you see this role evolving?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think with AI coming in, I definitely see that, there are a lot of companies that are employing AI and using AI and developing AI-based features. And I think that just is going to there's going to be a lot more focus on safety, because, a big thing that we need to be doing is ensuring that these AI products are safe to use and all of those things. So I definitely think that the role of the clinical safety officer is going to be, there's going to be a lot more focus on safety because AI is out there. And, we know that with technology, things move really fast in technology and regulation is sort of a little bit slower.
Yeah.
I think that the regulation is catching up a little bit more now. So we will see that. I personally think that we will see that there's a lot more focus around the regulation of AI. And I definitely think that, clinical safety officers are going to be really important in making sure that patients remain safe when people are using AI with them. But yeah.
So finally, wrapping up, it's been almost hitting a 1 hour mark anyway. So what does success look like to you now, and what impact do you hope to make in this space?
A very good question. What does success look to me now? I think for me, success is, ensuring or helping organizations to develop and build and implement products safely and being a part of that process. I think what was second part of the question?
Then what impact do you hope to make?
The impact. Well, I hope that I'll be able to help people, continues to help people really. Yeah. I mean, that's what I came into nursing for in the beginning, the first place, to help people, help others. So I hope that through my clinical safety work that I continue to help patients, probably, it's indirectly now, indirectly helping patients to get the best of the systems and to help ensure that they're, safe whilst they're using the systems. And also, helping other nurses or healthcare professionals if they're interested in digital, coming into the digital space. I hope that I'll be able to help them realize their potential or help them transition if that's something that they're really passionate about. So, yeah.
All right, amazing. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. I mean, it shows how deeply clinical your experience can actually shape digital innovation. So, for every nurse, midwife, or clinician, or allied health professional listening today, I hope this episode sort of reminds you that your clinical insight is very exactly what the digital health world needs right now. So, like Oyinkan said, you can connect with her on LinkedIn to follow our work in digital clinical safety. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving your career beyond the bedside. I'll see you guys in the next episode.